Zinedine Zidane sits on the Mount Rushmore of soccer as one of the all-time greats. He's considered the favorite player of many football connoisseurs and had some of the all-time best single-game performances. He may have ended his career on a sour note with the headbutt in the 2006 World Cup final, when in reality, his grace and style combined with his steely, driven mentality gave way to an incredible 8 to 10 year prime. From maturing into the 1998 World Cup final to retiring after his 2006 World Cup final exit from football, his peak was delightful. And as a key member of the Galacticos at Real Madrid, he often outshone them all. Just how good was Zidane actually? It is quite well known that Zinedine Zidane is of Algerian background when died France in 1972. Marseille were famously running away with the French league in 1988 when Zizou was making his moves into professional football. He ended up getting picked up by AS Caen, further east down the French Riviera. Crossing the province region of France must have been tough at the age of 16. Marseille was a tough city, high in crime, and Caen was home to the rich and famous, with luxury holiday homes and yacht-filled harbors. Zinedine would get into a lot of trouble early on for reacting violently to others mocking his rough upbringing and Arabic descent, something that would come back to haunt him at the very end of his career. Overcoming the separation from his family by being taken in by one of his coaches, Zidane relaxed and developed well on the South Coast. 4 years later, he would become highly desired after a solid season with Caen in League One. They managed to get into Europe for the first time, but the season after, they would struggle to manage all the competitions. They ended up getting relegated in Zizou's second full season, but Bordeaux were coming up in the opposite direction. They added the 21-year-old to a club with superb young players like Christophe Dugarry, Vicente Lizarazu, and Marcio Santos at the time. Christophe and Vicente went on to play over 150 caps for France between them. Marcio Santos was the starting center back for the World Cup winning Brazil team in 1994. That was some young core to add an up-and-coming Zizou to, and they went from strength to strength. Bordeaux shot straight up to a fourth-place finish in their first season back in League One. Zidane hit 10 goals in his first season, where he would sometimes run out on the wing. Amazingly, they bettered their finish the next season with third place and were a constant in Europe during this period. Ironically, Zizou's best run in Europe thus far came in Bordeaux's worst season domestically. They went all the way to the finals in 1996, losing to a formidable Bayern Munich side, but could not hold on to their spot in the top tier of France. Zidane's 22-goal investments in 51 games in all competitions surely convinced the world that the relegation was not down to him, as he was rewarded with his first start for France. His club situation alerted several big teams at the time to a potential bargain, as it was rumored the top two sides in England, Manchester United and Newcastle, were vying for his signature. With fellow South of France native and French international teammate David Ginola flying high for Newcastle at the time, they were apparently favorites to sign him. Another team that played in black and white stripes came knocking that summer that were slightly more alluring. Juventus had just won the Champions League. Turin was also just a few hours train ride from where he grew up playing, so it was an easy decision. It goes without saying that Juve were a beast of a side in 1996. Alessandro Del Piero became one of the best attacking midfielders in Europe at 22. French captain Didier Deschamps had signed a year earlier from Zizou's local team Marseille, while alongside Zidane, they added tanks up front in Alan Boxic and Christian Vieri, who mowed down all defenses in Italy and the Champions League. Despite losing midfield general Paulo Sousa and the two legendary strikers Fabrizio Ravanelli and Gianluca Vialli to the Premier League, Juve had done enough in the transfer market. Zinedine entered his peak here being paired with these superb players. Going to back-to-back Champions League finals went along with back-to-back Serie A wins. Juve were dominant. Alessandro Del Piero had an immense season in the 97-98 season with 48 goal involvements in 47 games in all competitions. Most notably, 14 involvements in 10 Champions League matches. 835 minutes in total meant a return every 59 minutes. Incredible. A hat-trick and assist to Zidane in the semifinal versus Monaco sealed their progression to the final. They would lose a second year in a row this time to Real Madrid, who were starting to challenge Juventus' dominance in Europe. 1998 would mark the true emergence of Zidane into his prime. Winning the league twice and 3 straight finals by Juve meant that they were on top of the world. He went into the summer as the face of the French national team heading into the World Cup in 1998 in his home country. Brazil were the clear favorites going into the tournament, with Ronaldo Nazário having won Serie A Player of the Year for his first season at Inter Milan. Despite Inter finishing second in the league, Alessandro Del Piero, who won Italian Footballer of the Year, was denied the double award win by the Brazilian, where Christian Vieri won both the year before and Roberto Mancini won both the year after. Del Piero clearly should have won both awards that year. Brazil destroyed everyone in the competition despite a small stumble against Norway. Zidane's tournament was almost thrown into jeopardy for a moment of madness. The host nation barely made it past Paraguay in the first knockout game, as Zizou had stamped on a Saudi Arabian player who clumsily slid on him but won the ball. He luckily only got a 2-game ban, bringing him back in the quarterfinal versus Italy and his teammate Del Piero. In another stroke of luck, Italian manager Maldini took off Del Piero just after the hour mark, meaning the game went through to penalties. Alessandro was also a penalty specialist who surely would have scored one of the 2 that Italy missed, and France were able to march on to the final against Brazil. In the third stroke of luck for Zinedine, the preparation for the World Cup final in Paris was dominated by the terrible news of Ronaldo's ill health. The Brazilian management had the difficult task deciding whether to play the European Player of the Year or go without him. R9 did end up starting for Brazil, but the damage had already been done in taking the vibes and energy out of the favorites with all the drama. France still had to break down a resolute defense, and it took 2 set pieces for the hosts to seal the deal. The image became etched in world football of Zidane rising up for 2 world-class headers that gave them a 2-goal lead and well and truly buried Brazil. Regardless of all the luck, Zidane had thrown himself into the elite of Europe heading into his prime after just turning 26 years old. He won the Ballon d'Or for his performances that year for club and country, and teams around the world knew it would be almost impossible to get him out of Juve. Meanwhile, in Madrid, Real were starting to make moves. After the summer of the World Cup, they upped their transfer spending from 15 million to 85 million euros. The following season, they declared a project called Galacticos, where they announced their plans to buy the best players in the world. The most controversial signing happened in the summer of 1999, where they brought over superstar winger Luis Figo from mega rivals FC Barcelona. Before leaving Juve, Zidane had one more accomplishment with France, who also went on to win the Euros in 2000. With Zizou scoring in the quarter and semi-final, he became more influential in overall play. He started to gain even more freedom, with fantastic defensive midfielder Patrick Vieira pairing up with Deschamps behind him. Thierry Henry was also entering his prime, which meant this was possibly an even more formidable team than had won the World Cup 2 years earlier. The super subs of Wiltord and Trezeguet won it for them in extra time against Italy in the final. This era of French dominance would have Zidane at its heart, and he played himself to the very top of the greatest ever conversations with these back-to-back wins. Arguably more valuable for Real Madrid that summer was buying Zidane's French teammate from 2000 onwards, Claude Makélélé. This would give them elite defensive cover to go even more extreme up front. So, in the summer of 2001, Juventus heard the knock on the door from the architect of the Galacticos era, Florentino Perez. He came in with a world record bid of 77.5 million euros to add Zidane to the stars he was assembling, and it was hard for them to say no. Juve were struggling after the World Cup, with Del Piero being hit with a horrible knee injury, finishing 6th in 1999. An embarrassing loss to Perugia on the final day of the 2000 season saw Lazio take the league, while Roma pipped them to the Scudetto in 2001. The Real Madrid Zidane is what most fans remember, but he was only there for 5 years. The combination of players and relaxed attitude to tactics really brought the best out of genius as he approached 30 years old. He was never the best at pressing or staying in front as a defender, which is why he needed Makélélé to play roles like Edgar Davids or Didier Deschamps did before. Zizou had never played with a player like Roberto Carlos, though. Whether he was bombing past him on the left wing or smashing a cross-field rocket to him on the right, he was a force of nature. Raul was also heavily influential at the time as well. The Madrid legend averaged just under a goal involvement per game in the first half of his Champions League career. With the team team still buzzing from the record transfer paid of all time, they took the Champions League by storm, seeing off FC Barcelona on the way to the final. The final was played at the National Sports Stadium of Scotland called Hampden Park against German upstarts Bayern Leverkusen. Zidane was at the height of his powers, and what he did in that game would go down in history. The only reason Leverkusen were there was on the back of some good recruitment, especially in South America, with defender Lucio and Placente. Combined with up-and-coming German talents like Michael Ballack, Oliver Neuville, and Bernd Schneider, they caused some problems. Everyone thought Real would easily dispatch of the young team, so going 1-0 up in 9 minutes was not a surprise. Lucio, one of the best center backs in Europe, had something to say about it though. He smashed in a header from a free kick and Real got worried. As halftime approached, the idea of going in tied meant there was tension in the stadium. Then, out of nowhere, Roberto Carlos bombed down the left wing as usual, but didn't have control and only managed to drill a ball skywards rather than cross it into the box. It just so happened that Zizou was standing on the top of the box, and he unleashed a full, clean, left-footed volley at hip height as it fell from the sky. The ball rocketed in at the near post in what was one of the all-time best goals in Champions League history. The difficulty of hitting a falling ball on target, let alone in the top corner, was only something Zidane and a few others could do. It proved both the inevitability of Real Madrid, but also the audacity and confidence of Zinedine that became synonymous with this style of play. Graceful but decisive. When the rest of the Galacticos landed at Real, the football was as if a charity game had been crossed with the World Cup final. Pure joy with incredible intensity of some of the most technical players in the world in peak condition. Ronaldo Nazario was the next out of this world player to be added to the group, easily the greatest player of that entire generation alongside Zidane, despite his horrendous injuries. Unfortunately, Ronaldo joined after recovering from back-to-back and third knee injury of his career, so was not at full fitness and struggled to maintain his highest level. Their meeting in the 1998 World Final was a long way behind them. They became great friends and a joy to watch on the same pitch. David Beckham joined from Manchester United after an alleged fallout with managerial legend Sir Alex Ferguson. Beckham's larger-than-life stardom in world football was ideal for Perez's Galacticos, while his playing style was important for what they needed. Zidane spoke out about Beckham's energy, work rate, and professionalism that fit perfectly at Real. Zizou scored an absolutely incredible goal from a Beckham cross-field pass that he met on the volley in the box. The level of precision from both the pass and the finish was the level of play fans were blessed with during the Galacticos era. Robinho and Sergio Ramos became the last two Real stars to be put around Zidane, but they since had lost the world's best defensive midfielder Claude Makélélé and superstar winger Figo. Raúl had also become a shadow of himself by then, and they struggled to win any silverware as they aged. The football at times was unlike anything seen before, and maybe never seen again. Roberto Carlos and David Beckham playing cross-field 1-2s was insane. Equally as eye-popping were drilled or floated 70-yard passes to Zizou or Ronaldo to control out of the sky. Crosses were whipped in from both wings, and Zidane linked it all together. He needed a simple midfield base behind him to drop the ball off to him, linked the right and left wings. Zizou would also play off the striker's movements, slide in passes, or combine to bring in others, which made him a master of this role. Few players would come close to the hold he could have on a game. Andres Iniesta and David Silva would do similar things from that position, but only Messi could be said to have had that type of influence from that position since Zidane. It's easier for the likes of Xavi, Scholes, Pirlo, and Modric to control the play from deeper positions, but carrying the ball to attack the box would often see him get caught in tight situations near the corner flag. Zizou could handle these situations with ease and really pull the opposition all over the pitch. The 2006 World Cup is where we would see Zinedine in all his glory. This tournament would be his last ever, and it will be forever tarnished by what happened in the final. Playing Italy, France had been frustrated by an incredible defensive machine in the grand Italian tradition. To highlight this, Fabio Cannavaro, Italian center back, would win the Ballon d'Or for their World Cup win. This made him the first center back to win the award in recent history. The final was tight, with Zidane scoring the first goal from the spot after Malouda went down in the box. Marco Materazzi header from a Andre Pirlo corner snuffed out their lead as both teams frustrated each other for the rest of the 90 minutes. The game went into extra time, where at minute 110, a coming together of Zidane and Materazzi, the two goal scorers, resulted in extras being said. Apparently, Materazzi insulted Zinedine as he was walking away, which caused him to turn around and headbutt the 6'4" center back in the chest. Zidane snapped, leaving his team a man down for 20 more minutes of extra time and without their main penalty taker. This must have surely weighed heavily on the rest of their players, as Zizou just did not miss from the spot. Ironically, Zinedine's ex-teammate and penalty wizard at Juventus, Alessandro Del Piero, had come on as a substitute, unlike in the 1998 World Cup knockout game, where he was taken off before the shootout. This meant with Pirlo and Del Piero, they had two great penalty takers. Materazzi, of course, had to score one to rub it in, and that's all. The next guy up for France, striker Trezeguet, missed the only one that lost it for France and Zidane. The 2006 World Cup was bittersweet, as football fans around the world were gifted some special individual performances by the Marseille-born maestro. Zizou dictated the play in the semi-final on a star-studded pitch. Figo paired up with a 21-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo, so three Ballon d'Or winners would grace the pitch together. Thierry Henry, who was up front for France that day, also should have had a Ballon d'Or by then. His return of 60 goals and assists in the 2003 season was not enough to see Zidane's replacement at Juventus, Pavel Nedved, take the award somewhat controversially. Needless to say, Zizou was instrumental in that game and tucked away the decisive penalty in a 1-0 win. His mesmerizing ball retention and interplay skills frustrated the Portuguese in the second half as he wound down the clock, which showed his utter dominance and garnered admiration from the crowd. His most majestic display would come in the game before that against Brazil in the quarterfinal. It would be described as one of the single most beautiful one-man displays in football history, combining his mental strength and intelligence with technical mastery and relentless physical effort. Even players that can touch him in those areas have failed to put together a single game where everything flowed so perfectly. This Brazil team alone had three Ballon d'Or winners starting up front. Couple that with the defense of Roberto Carlos, Lucio, and Cafu, and it was one of the scariest Brazil teams of all time. Ronaldo was 30 by then, but had been in great shape for the tournament. He was greeted with smiles and hugs from his Real teammate. Kaká and Ronaldinho were also in the primes at this point, so they were the favorites going in. But it would be Zidane who would show the world the meaning of Jogo Bonito. Thierry Henry would grab the headlines with the superbly taken goal from a Zidane free kick, and amazingly that Brazil team failed to score. Most football fans prefer to remember these games of Zinedine's last few games rather than the headbutt in the final. That was his last action on a football pitch, but it could not have been further from what he could do with the ball at his feet. Given the resounding nature of the games leading up to his retirement, we can say that Zidane's peak stretched from 1996 to 2006. Being bought by Juventus in 1996 and having an instant impact meant he was ready for the spotlight of being the star player for his nation as they hosted the World Cup in 1998. If you enjoy these in-depth breakdowns of global soccer topics, hit the like button at least. Jump in and subscribe too. It's free and it takes time to put these things together. Much love for checking out our channel though. We hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Zinedine Zidane exhibited grace and decisiveness unlike any player in history. He won many fans by his seductive skills and control of the ball in any situation, but he kept people engaged with his control over an entire game. His presence always drew defenders and onlookers' gaze wherever he was on the pitch. This grew with him as a player as he moved to bigger and bigger stages, from moving to Turin in 1996 to the theatrical displays at the Bernabeu all the way through to the 2006 World Cup final. It is hard to compare him to anyone today with his unique skill set. He had a career to match his greatness. He's arguably in the top 5 of all time, or up there with Cristiano Ronaldo for best European player of all time. It was a shame how he finished his career, but it doesn't take away from the brilliant performances he gifted the football world with.